Hello, writers, and welcome to the Researchers Writing Podcast. This podcast is for all your researchers in the sciences who want to write papers in a structured and time efficient way so you can get published in top tier journals at a calm and steady pace. In this podcast, we talk about how we can write papers that are clear, concise, and compelling, and how to make the process of writing less hard. My name is Dr. Anna Clemens, and I am an academic writing coach with a PhD in chemistry. In the Researchers Writing Academy, my online program, I've helped hundreds of researchers get their papers published in their target journals using a streamlined writing process. If you want to succeed in your academic career, mentor your students effectively, and have your research make an impact in the world, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello again, writers. Well, welcome back to the Researchers Writing Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. It's funny, whenever I start recording, Zusa, my dog, starts drinking. So, maybe you hear that in the background. Happened the last few recordings I've done. All right. Well, today I want to talk to you about some very persistent myths that I keep encountering about scientific writing and particularly about writing research papers. And I think it's very, very important to know about these myths because maybe you are holding one of those wrong beliefs, and maybe that is what's keeping you from actually being like good and successful at writing papers, meaning, you enjoy the process, you are feeling like you are efficient at it, and you are able to publish your papers in a calm and steady way in those journals that you are wanting to publish in. So we'll be talking through 5 myths, and I'll explain kind of why I don't think these are true and give you a bit of an alternative point of view for each one of them. All right, so the 5 myths that we are going to go through today are: number one, you need to be a native English speaker to write articles that get published in top tier journals. Number two, storytelling covers up holes in your research. Number three, you need to use fancy and complicated phrases and sentence structures so you are perceived as an expert. Number four, to get published in a top tier journal, it's sufficient to hire someone to proofread and clean up your language. Number five, writing is just always a slow and frustrating process, meaning that's kind of the nature of writing. All right, any of these sound familiar? Well, let's get into it. All right, so myth number one, you need to be a native English speaker to write articles that get published in top tier journals. Well, so if English is your first language, then you are undeniably at an advantage because you won't need to learn another language's words, grammar, sentence structure, all those things, right? That are a prerequisite to write an article in English and to get that article published. But also, that doesn't mean that every native English speaker or someone whose first language is English automatically knows how to write, let alone how to write scientific papers. What I want you to really think about is how writing really is a different skill than being proficient in English, than having gone through school in English, through your education in English. That is a different thing. Knowing how to speak is a different thing than knowing how to write. And academic writing, well, that is yet another skill that is completely different from writing poetry. I don't know, writing papers for your high school or college classes. Like that's a totally different thing. Academic writing is its own genre. And this is why, well, academic writing, I really see it as this craft, as this skill that every researcher has to learn and practice before they become good at it. Like literally everyone has to learn it. And if, you know, you are someone whose first language actually is English, um, then I guess you're struggling in most cases. Um, Not so much with the grammar, you kind of know where to put commas more or less. Um, well, writing well doesn't only mean that you know, like, a lot of different words, that your vocabulary is big, or that you know punctuation and things like that. But for like writing a really good paper, what that needs is that you need to be able to know how to structure that. And ideally, I think you need to know how you can tell a concise story in your paper. And really, well, that's not anything that you automatically know as a native English speaker. I actually think, really, that both native and non-native English speakers need to take high quality writing training, or for both of those groups, meaning for everyone, it's a game changer. It really is. I see it happening in the Researchers Writing Academy, the program that I lead all the time. I estimate that we have about 50%. So it's about 50-50 native, non-native English speakers in there. So the program really attracts a lot of native English speakers, a lot of people who grow up in the US, who grew up in an English speaking country, and yet they really need that help. So if you are a non-native English speaker, and you think that this is the reason why you're not getting your papers published, then I just want you to maybe think about again, well, maybe this is not the whole truth. Maybe there's something more that you need. And actually, as a little side note, being a native English speaker can even complicate things. Because when you are, you may be prone to using kind of unnecessarily long and complicated sentences and also words. Like if your vocabulary is really big, you may use words that the scientific community doesn't really easily understand. Keeping in mind that the scientific community is kind of comprised of people with different English language capabilities. So, really, what we want to do is to make sure we're writing in a way that is understood by everyone. All right. Well, this kind of leads us to myth number two. And myth number two is storytelling covers up holes in your research. I think that some researchers think that storytelling is just like this tool to make weak research, weak studies sound better, kind of to sell them, to market them. Um, and I think I know, or I have a kind of feeling why this myth has evolved. One thing is that a story, right, can mean so many different things. And really, one of those meanings, of course, is to invent something, right? To make something up. But that really isn't the only definition. Um, Also, I think you probably, and I certainly have read papers where the tool of storytelling has been abused, in my opinion, where it actually was used in a way, or where parts of that tool yeah, I'm teaching storytelling a little differently than I guess how those people who abuse it have used it. But I argue also that it's not really the tool's fault. It's really the fault of authors who are being dishonest and who are kind of trying to cover up by kind of overselling their research in their paper. But I think that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use storytelling because I still think storytelling is really, really, really what you need. Because the way that I teach using storytelling in research paper is that I give you, researchers, a framework that achieves that. First of all, you give your reader all the necessary context to grasp your study. Secondly, so that the readers can clearly see the motivation for your study. And thirdly, that they can understand the significance of your study. So it's really a tool that makes it so that your research paper becomes this like clear, concise, compelling work to the reader. So it's easy to understand. The reader kind of gets it, grasps it, and also understands, oh, this is really important. Like they really see, wow, yeah, this is really important and urgent research. So when you start using my scientific storytelling framework, you'll see how actually identifying the story of a paper will really help you to uncover holes in your research rather than fill them. Okay, let's get to myth number 3. And that is that you need to use fancy and complicated phrases and sentence structures so you are perceived as an expert, as a scientific author. All right. Well, I think the one deciding factor for whether your article is getting published in the journal that it deserves to get published in is whether you have been understood. So, using complicated language, I think, is just one sure way to confuse your reader. And remember, your readers, they really don't know your research as well as you. We tend to always overestimate how much our readers are familiar with our topic. And also, we overestimate how much time and how much energy they're willing to invest in trying to understand what we mean when we are writing. They're most likely just going to be confused. They're not gonna make the effort. If you are not being super duper clear, they are not, most of the times, not going to make the effort to understand what you mean, or they're just going to misunderstand you and think they understood you correctly, but actually they misunderstood you. Kind of the reviewer number 2 situation, maybe. Yeah, so I think really using complicated English does not impress your readers, but it rather frustrates them. So when someone has to like just, pause frequently to be able to follow your train of thoughts, trying to get what you mean, spend like, effort, and also remember like maybe they didn't sleep well last night, right? Like how much time are they actually spending on reading the literature? Like how much time are you spending reading the literature? Like what kind of priority does this take in your day? Well, most likely you are not reading um, the literature like the first thing in the morning with your like most awake brain most of the time, right? Or when you peer review papers, that also often like moves a little more to like the fringes of your day because you have other things. You're so busy, you have other things to do that just are a little more important to your own research. So this is really why my scientific mantras are simplicity and clarity. So you don't want to shy away from short sentences, simple words, repeating phrases. Like, do not use like different synonyms for one and the same thing and kind of vary them. This confuses readers endlessly. Like, even when they know your topic, they then start, they just start to think, well, does this now mean, and is this like different from what you said before? Like, it's just every little question that your reader has to ask themselves is slowing them down and is making them frustrated and is making them more likely to misunderstand you. And the last thing, you want to make your writing flow logically from one sentence to the next so that, again, your reader never has to stop and think and guess. And yeah, I really think this is the way to actually impress your readers. This is when they think, ooh, this was a really well-written article, is those simple and clear papers. And remember, your readers include journal editors and peer reviewers as well. They don't have all the time in the world either to assess your paper, so keep that in mind. All right, myth number 4. To get published in a top-tier journal, it's sufficient to hire someone to proofread and clean up your language. Okay, before we get into this one, I actually want to tell you about my free writing training. Do you find yourself feeling scatterbrained when you're writing a paper? If actually you've never been taught how to write a paper, the learning curve to know how to best structure the flow of your paper is hard. But that's why I created a free training video for you. Just go to researcherswritingpodcast.com/free and have me walk you through how you can become a more efficient writer so you can consistently publish your manuscript. That's researcherswritingpodcast.com/free. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Okay, so let's talk about this myth that hiring an editor is all you need to get published when maybe you have experienced that, oh, I'm often getting rejected by the journals I want to get published in. So let me tell you, hiring an external editor to proofread your article won't be sufficient because, first of all, most editors only focus on the language. So they'll correct your English, they put commas in the right place. And when you're lucky, if you find a good one, they make sure that your writing is succinct. Like they do a little bit more work in your sentences and paragraphs. But very, very few editors actually tackle kind of the underlying structure of your text, of your manuscript. And I don't think I've really met anyone who really tackled the story of your paper. Actually, when I was an editor and I did that, this was so difficult to explain to my clients. And I just noticed, wow, nobody else is doing this. Like, because I was spending so much time and so much work on editing that it almost became, well, I wasn't paid well enough to do that. And I think this is why most editors, they just don't have the time to do that. Like editing is not a job that gets paid, I think, enough because it actually requires really, really high skill. So depending on who you hire, like you will just not get this level of editing, even when you hire a so-called developmental editor. And especially, and I've got some insight in this because I once applied for a job in one of the big kind of editing houses where uh, yeah, some publishers have those or working with those kind of bigger companies where they have a lot of kind of freelance editors that work for them, and they can call it developmental editing, but it's never to the level that um, I would deem thorough enough if you really, really are concerned about your story being really like clear and concise and compelling. And well, a clear, concise, and compelling story. This is, I think, what you need if you want to get published. Like if you, especially if you want to get published in top tier journals, or if you, let's say, if you want to get your article published as highly as possible, then this is what you need. This will always help getting your article in the best journal that it possibly can. And well, apart from that, I think if you always have to rely on another person to edit your manuscripts before you submit them, that just isn't really a long-term solution for me. If you say, okay, I know how to write an article and I'm just using an editor to kind of proofread at the end to clean it up a little bit, and you kind of thought that, like your research group kind of thought that, that's a different story. But if you really needing to rely on someone to even get your article to a place where you think it's even possible to get in the journals that you're kind of targeting, then that's a different thing. Yeah, so I really want you to think like how much time could you save? Like if you had a system for writing this like clear, convincing, concise papers, how much time would you save if you had that process, if you had that system that you could use every time you write a paper? Um, because really, when you think about it, most researchers haven't been formally trained in writing. And I think proper scientific writing training goes way beyond like linguistics and goes into into this nitty-gritty of how to write a scientific paper, kind of step by step. And this is so, so rare. And this is actually exactly the motivation that I had for creating the Researchers Writing Academy because I didn't see this existing anywhere else. Rant over. So let's get to myth number 5, that writing is just like this slow, frustrating process, that this is just kind of just the nature of writing. So I think if you scroll anywhere through like social media, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Instagram, or wherever you hang out, or you listen to conversations, or you have conversations with your colleagues, you'll most likely hear researchers complaining about the writing they have to do. I think that's kind of like the common perceived um, truth that, well, writing is just really hard and, oh, I can't be bothered to write. I don't have time to write, all those things. And it seems to be like generally accepted well, writing is just this unwelcome chore that you have to do after actually having done the research. But you know what? It really doesn't have to be like this. And I see it again and again with the researchers who have become members of the Researchers Writing Academy and who have implemented the systems that we teach in the course and in the program. And what I hear from them is, well, they report that they have started to experience flow during their writing, and then writing papers becomes a lot faster for them, and that it starts to feel easy. And not a few of our members actually are telling us they're starting to really enjoy writing. So this truly is possible. There are people out there, even researchers who didn't used to enjoy writing, for whom it was like a real emotional burden, for whom it was difficult and slow and frustrating. There are even researchers out there like that who then have started to enjoy writing, who really like that kind of deep work time that feels really like productive and flowy for them. What I've also seen is that through the scientific storytelling framework that we teach, that I mentioned in myth number 2 earlier, a lot of researchers actually start getting excited about their research again and about the paper that they're writing. I think this is so, so important as well, because sometimes when you have, especially when the process is really long and frustrating for you, you sometimes get so annoyed you can't even like see how exciting your data, your research actually is. But when you start using the scientific storytelling framework and you start seeing your data in this bigger picture again, when you think about, okay, why is this significant? Well, like possible implications could this have? And you put it all together, it's almost like you're selling this to yourself, like in a good way. Like, I don't mean selling in this like bad way, but you're really just making yourself understand again, okay, this is actually really cool. And we've had a lot of members who then went, ooh, like they really got motivated to work on the article again. So, well, what's the secret then? Like, how do I get to enjoy writing? And how do I get to have this process of writing a paper be faster and less hard? Well, you need to have a system. So I think the most important thing is you need to have a system. You need to know what to do at each step in the writing process. And yeah, we're teaching a system in the course, in the program. And if you want to get kind of the overview, the bird's eye view of that system, then go to our free training. That's researcherswritingpodcast.com/free, and you'll get to that free training if you're interested to kind of get the overview of the steps that we are teaching. So yeah, I just want to, I guess, leave you with that question of, well, you are going to have to write papers for the rest of your academic career. Well, how do you want this process to be? Do you want it to be easy, or do you want to keep struggling and spending way more time than you actually need on that? Yeah, we've come to the end. We've made it through all the 5 commonly held beliefs about scientific writing that I don't think are true. And I kind of try to explain why I think that. And I'm really, really interested to hear if I could convince you of any of them, if you kind of had maybe a little bit of an epiphany during this episode, or just got thinking, or maybe you disagree with me. That's fine too. So if you want to chat, if you want to comment, you can head to YouTube if you're currently listening on the audio. Like on a podcast player, then you can head to YouTube and comment under the YouTube video. You can just search for Researchers Writing Podcast, or you can find me on Blue Sky, where I'm at annaclemens.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'd love to chat more. And thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for joining me every week, or maybe this was your first episode you listened, then welcome. And yeah, see you again next week. Bye. If you would like to submit a question for me to answer on the podcast, please head to researcherswritingpodcast.com/question. That's researcherswritingpodcast in one word.com/question. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, it would really mean the world to me if you could review it in your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever app you're using. The more reviews a show has, the more likely it will be shown to others who are looking for podcasts in the academic writing space. So thank you.